right.
Yep,
We're good. Okay. So let me just go back to that main screen. The first slide. Oh yeah. One more. Hi. Okay. Welcome everybody to our webinar called Combating Piracy. I am Umair Kazi. I'm a staff attorney at the Authors Guild. I have with me today Devin Weston, who's Director of Client Management of the Guardian product at Digimarc. Welcome, Devin. Do you want to introduce yourself in a little bit with more flourish?
Sure. Well, thanks for inviting me. I'm really happy to be here. So I manage the client relations and operations for the Digimarc Guardian team, and one of our primary solutions is an ebook anti-piracy solution for the publishing industry. So that's why I'm here.
Awesome. And just before we kind of dive into the pirate waters, I just want to remind everybody that you're free to ask questions anytime. You should have a Q&A button somewhere on your screen, either on the bottom or top right corner of your screen. You can send in any questions you have anytime during the webinar. We will have a 10 to 15 minute answer session at the end. So we'll address all of your questions then. But you don't have to wait until the end to send them in. You can send them anytime. All right, so I'm sure that most, if not all of the people attending this webinar know at least, know what piracy is. It is people, well, it's the practice of selling products, especially intellectual property products, music, movies, and books, without copies of those things without authorization from the copyright holder. So it is it's certainly copyright infringement, but it's on a mass scale, and the product then competes with authorized and legitimate copies. So piracy has been a big problem from the 16th century, when publishing kind of became a huge thing. And as a result, we had the inception of various types of publishers licenses to curb piracy. It's always been getting people, rights holders, and pirates. However, in the last 10 years since ebooks kind of took off, it's just the epidemic has spread, and now you can go on Facebook, LinkedIn, any number of sites, and there are illegitimate actors advertising PDFs or EPUBs or any number of formats of pirated books. So, and aggravating the problem is the fact that a lot of publishers, even publishers that have in-house dedicated enforcement teams and personnel, scoping out the internet for pirated copies and sending takedown notices, even they are struggling to keep up with just how much piracy there is out there. And not to mention, if you're a self-published author or even a small publisher, you don't have those resources at your disposal, so you're doing everything on your own and taking valuable time out of everything else that you have to do to be a successful self-published author or small publisher. So suffice it to say, the enforcement is nearly impossible. And we'll talk a little bit more later in the webinar about the DMCA, Digital Millennium Copyright Act in Section 512. Which allows copyright holders to send an online takedown notice when they see stolen copies of their content on a website. And specifically, we'll also talk about a little bit about the safe harbor provision that allows those websites and internet service providers to sort of skirt liability for pirated content that's posted by their users. I mean, it's as if you have sent a 512 notice down, you will know that it's not easy it doesn't do a very good job of permanently and perpetually removing the pirated copy of the book. Now, we do have a number of resources available also on our website, including a form notice, DMCA notice that you can use and tailor to send out to Google or Facebook or any website. I mean, a lot of those platforms have their own reporting mechanism. So Google has a DMCA dashboard that you can use to report violators. Facebook has a process as well. But if it's a third-party website and they don't have a form, you can use our form to send them a letter. All right, so I will after we've defined the problem a little bit, and so we'll go over some common types of digital piracy that we see these days. And you know, as we do, just want to mention right now that we'll be, with Devin especially here, we'll be discussing going into the weeds of a massive study that Nielsen and Digimarc did together on piracy, kind of studying what motivates people to get pirated books instead of buying books, what kind of websites there are, the demographics of pirates. So we'll get to that in a couple of minutes. You may have heard of all of these various forms of piracy. There are torrents. It's a client that you download on your computer, and it seeds basically content from a network of people that have those books or movies. It used to be fairly popular, I think, maybe 5 or 6 years ago, but it's kind of become less mainstream. There are book repositories and pirate libraries. Every now and then we hear about a website that has tens of thousands of books, and you know, known as pirate libraries, and anyone can download books from these websites. They're all pirated copies. I see here that we have two bullets here that are kind of similar. Illegal websites would fall under the category of those pirate libraries, and one of the most notorious ones that you might have heard of is ebook.bike, which we've been fighting against for some time. And there's another one called epub.pub. And the way these sites work is that they purportedly have users that upload pirated copies of books to them. The book repositories are usually the pirates themselves setting up something for people to download from. ebookbike, epub.up, some of these websites, they take advantage of the DMCA safe harbor that I mentioned in response to with respect to the previous slide, because they claim that we're not the ones actually putting up any of this pirated content. It's our users. We'll discuss this a little bit more down the line. There are LiveGen and Sci-Hub, which are also pretty large repositories. There's counterfeit sales happening on Amazon and Google Books and Barnes & Noble, where pirates upload unauthorized copies. Either they take content from a book under copyright and slap a fake cover and try to sell it like that. They also use publish on demand methods. It's predominantly digital, but a lot of POD we're also seeing. We have seen cases of pirated translations where unauthorized translations come out in foreign countries and sort of usurp a foreign language market for an author. And then probably the most common type of piracy notification that we get isn't actually piracy. It's various sorts of internet scams, including phishing emails where phishing websites that ask their visitors to type in credit card information, or promise a subscription program for unlimited ebooks. 5% of those sorts of sites are just phishing for information, to sell to hackers, any number of things. There are affiliate programs where fake links are created to drive traffic to certain websites. And in these cases, what's going on is that the website doesn't actually have pirated copy on the servers. They're just advertising it to get your traffic. So let's move on. All right, Devin, do you want to sort of, tell us what the harrowing facts that you discovered as you were working on this?
Yeah, absolutely. So as Yumir mentioned, we back in 2017 worked with Nielsen and essentially commissioned them to do a survey using I believe at that time they called it their Books and Consumer Survey. So this is actually an ongoing survey that they run, but at different times they might gather different data points from the respondents. So we worked with them and we said, well, we'd like to know if you can ask your respondents on these surveys if they've pirated a copy of a work of an ebook in the past, I believe it was 6 months. And they answer yes. Can you answer these other questions about the methods and the motivations for that? So that's where all of these stats come from. So this is a really interesting one, and it really does sort of tie into Yumir's last slide, which it shows that pirates aren't going to one particular place to get their content. They might go to, one of those obvious pirate sites, just a free download, whether it's torrent or a CyberLock or one-click host. They might go to a friend and get it on a flash drive. We're seeing increasing amounts of like discounted PDFs of works being sold on eBay. So that's I think even since we did this, that has been a growing trend. But yeah, it's really that, as a matter of convenience, it seems pirates will go multiple places to get content. And of course they were able to choose multiple answers here. So the metrics reflect that.
Right. And I think, the question is usually, where does this pirate file originate that then just sort of, get circulated around, because we can, we see if a website is advertising free books and we know it, but what if you have a private Dropbox folder, as you mentioned, and then it seems like it's a pretty high percentage of people that get them from their closed networks as opposed to, websites on Google.
Yeah, it does seem, there's the kind of, it to me almost seems like an old school form of piracy where there's a pirate who's doing it at for sort of the, the show, right? They're putting this out there so everyone can get it. But then there is a growing amount of piracy that seems to be happening. And this is the one that, we really, other than in this self-reported kind of data, it's very hard to obtain information on how much sharing has happened via closed networks. I will say, with one of the solutions that Digimarc has, which is a document watermarking that some of our publishers have used, so that can actually map back to essentially the point of distribution or point of sale. So they have like a little code in there, doesn't have any information in it other than this code that says this is the channel or this is the point where it came from. So some publishers have used that to say, oh, the books found on this site all came from, if it's a direct to consumer sale, then they might know a particular, actual point of sale. But otherwise, it's like a sales channel, or maybe if it's an academic publisher, it'd say, oh, well, these are the files that we sent to that particular institution. So it doesn't necessarily, again, implicate exactly who and where. The motivations are distinct as well, but that can start to sort of map back and say, oh, this might be where the source of the leak has come from. So this is more data that publishers are using lately to do exactly that, to sort of find out where the leaks are coming from.
And are there any kind of like major points of vulnerability that you see and that publishers see in this area, or?
So far, I would say that the data is sort of inconclusive on that. I think, you kind of see it mapped approximately based on the highest sales channel volume. So you see more pirated copies that map back to wherever you sell the most copies, which makes sense. But yeah, I think that data will get more interesting as we get more different types of publishers with different types of distribution methods. So.
not to get too technical, but I understand that there's a lot going on in terms of using blockchain technology to sort of keep a ledger of when unauthorized copies are produced. Is the Digimarc watermark technology sort of, based on the same principle to sort of, yeah.
So the interesting thing is our watermarking technology is capable of carrying a blockchain payload. At this point, we haven't had, a particular interest from any publishers who've said, I want to make sure, blockchain is in these payloads that you guys are delivering to us. But that is something that has come up certainly since blockchain has become, sort of the big thing. I think any digital ledger, I think there's potential for that to be really interesting. Again, it's not going to stop anything.
Right.
I don't know. I think you might deter, the casual pirates who are like, oh, my name's in here. No, I don't, or, some transaction of me, but, the hardcore pirates, I'm not sure. So.
Yeah, there's some sort of something that identifies you as being in possession of that, unauthorized copy.
Yeah.
That's something to think about.
Yeah.
All right. So speaking of just kind of some statistics as to show how rapidly this problem has kind of is growing. Between 2009 and 2013, that's when ebooks first started kind of coming into the market. The number of alerts we get or complaints for piracy went up by 300%, and the figure keeps climbing. So between 2013 and today, which is 6 years, we have seen another 76% increase. And of course, I mean, there's obviously correlation between, ebooks kind of becoming for a while the dominant format. And as more and more people discovered them, there's more piracy going on. But also, as authors are educated about piracy, they become more concerned and send us complaints. But referring back to the Nielsen Digimarc joint survey, this is a staggering figure. U.S. publishers lose about $315 million in lost sales. And of course, as authors know, your income is tied to sales of books because you get paid a royalty, or even if you're a self-published author, those are copies you could be selling that people are not buying. So all of those lost sales actually translate to lost incomes for authors. According to our income survey, those incomes are also down very despairingly so. 67% of authors earn less than poverty level from their writing. So we mentioned, we talk about that piracy is growing, but we often, we don't have a clear idea of what motivates people. I mean, and in our practice, in my practice, I see all kinds of, all kinds of reasons. And well, they're not necessarily reasons. It's just, fans might go ahead and instead of buying books, just start like pirate communities, fans of certain, famous published authors. And it also seems like, according to this study, which is a fact that was widely reported in the media, I think after the study came out, was that most pirates tend to be, or people that traffic in pirated copies tend to be males between in the mid to late 30s, and also not impoverished by any means. Devin, did you want to elaborate on that? I see here, illegal download. Sorry, I'm just going to move the screen out because their ages tend to be between 30 and 44-year-old, and the yearly household income is between 60 and 99,000. So obviously, people that download books illegally are just as capable of buying them.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
And I think for me, sort of what I came away from this, reading this study and understanding it, it seemed to be that pirates are consumers of content, you know, and remember too that this is self-reported and these people are engaged in the books, you know, and you know, books and consumer survey and things like that. So there is a degree that you have to sort of, you know, take that with a grain of salt. These are people who are really voracious readers, probably.
Right.
But that they really, you know, these aren't people who necessarily, you know, you get this kind of picture in your mind of someone who can't, you know, get anything but a free copy or something, but it really doesn't bear out in this data. One of the most astounding things, while the primary sort of bulk of the reporters or the survey respondents were male, there was actually a really significant portion that was female, which again is sort of one of these, you just don't, you know, necessarily have that in your mind as the stereotypical pirate.
Right.
So it's really, I think, you know, in terms of research like this, yeah, I think of pirates as consumers, and I think of them as like some of the most powerful tactics you can therefore take are to just make sure that we educate and we drive people, whoever they are, especially fan communities, like you were saying, to the legal copies and why and that kind of thing. So.
It also seems like you know, people are voracious readers, but it also seems like there's a kind of a hoarding element sometimes. I mean, some of the even just these pirate websites, people that you know, just going through forums and hearing about what people download and what they don't download. A lot of times it's just anything that's available, which is
Yes.
sort of a, you know, an odd like compulsion to
Yeah.
just own all of this content.
Yeah. Well, and you know, you see one of the things we see on pirate sites a lot are zip files of the New York Times bestsellers. So you kind of think, well, okay, maybe there are some people who just every day they go in and they read through, not every day, but you know, go in and read through the New York Times bestseller list. But you know, that isn't necessarily how and why people read. You know, it isn't just, oh, well, that's the best selling, so I'm going to read it. So it's an interesting. There's definitely that mentality in some pirates to say, I'm just going to get all of it and I'm going to put it all out there, you know, doesn't matter. Yeah.
It doesn't matter. I mean, and it's not like, you know, in some cases it's monetized, as I understand. There can be different ways a pirate site is monetized. There can be ads, or you know, often, you know, fairly salacious ads, or you can have a donation community. I know ebook Bike has you know, has a donation box, and also you know, every now and then the founder of that website, Travis McCrea, might do like a Patreon campaign. I don't know how much money he raises. I mean, of course, like once people realize that he's trying to raise money for a pirate website, the campaigns are often prematurely taken offline. But it's not to say that you know, there is some money in it, but I think like there's a lot of piracy that's just done for the sake of piracy, it seems.
Absolutely. Yep.
All right, so let's moving on. What? Oh, sorry. Right. Yeah, some more statistics. And I see in the Q&A, someone had asked if there was a genre that was popular, and I think the answer is that fiction seems to dominate across all age groups. Older. Would you say, Devin, is this fair to say that more fiction is pirated than other forms, or is it just like impossible to assess? And you know, like in the sense that if I write fiction, if I'm a fiction writer, should I be more worried that my book will get pirated, or?
Right. You know, we've contemplated this a bit. I think to a certain extent, you know, if we compare, for example, a trade publisher to an academic publisher, it's almost like the audiences, the legitimate audiences, and the reach of those titles mirror on in piracy. So if you have a niche book, if you have a nonfiction that's you know, directed at a very particular, you know, subgenre or something like that, that's probably kind of the level of piracy that you might expect to find. Whereas on fiction, it's just, these are, you know, mass produced, not, you know, mass produced, but this is just the highest volume of content that's out there, and that can kind of skew the results. So you know, again, it's like what's available, and then
Right.
what am I going to say I downloaded? So
Yeah.
that could skew it. Yeah.
Right, right. For sure, certainly. I mean, you know, if it's a highly specialized academic text on, you know, like phenomenology or something like that,
Exactly. Yeah.
it's gonna have a very small. It's not going to be disseminated as widely, but the pirate copy still exists out there.
Yeah.
And I think for genre writers, it's certainly a big concern because a lot of those fans are voracious readers in romance, for instance. And now because mostly all romance is completely migrated to the digital medium, there hardly any romance. There's publishers don't really carry romance lists anymore. You may have POD romance, but by and large, people just download, you know, fairly steeply discounted ebooks and read in series. So there's also more scope for pirating because there's just more ebooks.
And we will frequently, actually, on the same sort of vein as seeing the New York Times bestsellers list in a zip file on a pirate site, we'll often see every book in a series, you know, say a popular YA series, something like that, and you just see every single one of them on a zip file on a pirate site. So it's just, you know, people collect and read and disseminate in that way.
And
So
then
yeah.
curate it and catalog it so it's easier for
Yes.
the next
Yeah.
next person. That's
Yep.
incredible.
Yeah.
I mean, I probably spent a lot of time doing that.
You wonder. Yeah. Yeah.
Were you involved in sort of the conceptualization and execution of the study? If you were, can you tell us a little bit more about what were your kind of motivations? What sorts of observations were you expecting, and did they match your expectations?
Yeah. So Nielsen really drove this. They you know, they have a whole group that does this survey on an ongoing basis and can kind of munge through the methodology and that kind of thing. But what we did was we said, well, here's some of our assumptions, and we want to challenge them. So this is where the questions about like where do you get content from, you know, what again the sort of background profiles, that kind of thing. So we put out there what we thought were likely candidate for answers, and then, you know, got that back and found out really, you know, I think some of the most surprising ones were some that you've highlighted in this, where, you know, we just weren't expecting people to go so many places. We weren't expecting, you know, high income, middle income people to be doing the most of the pirating. And that sort of thing. But then in terms of the conclusions of the study, so Nielsen went, and then this is why it has to go through Nielsen, because they have the, you know, the Nielsen data on BookScan and that sort of thing. So they then took the survey results and then put that through basically a methodology that compared it to that books data and came up with this conclusion. And one of the things that they said, you know, to us really is, again, because this is self-reported, because this is people who took the Books and Consumer Survey, this is, you know, how we reached that estimate of the 315 million in the U.S. market, but that's probably pretty conservative, you know. So
right,
yeah.
right. It's interesting. How do you know how regularly they execute this survey? Is it just? I mean, because they're collecting data all the time, but are they aggregating it on a regular basis to see if the trends are changing per year or anything of that sort?
So my understanding is the Books and Consumers, which I believe may have been rebranded, but the one that was called Books and Consumers in 2017 is run, I wouldn't say continuously, but they run it, you know, periodically. And this is data that they have to sort of inform their business.
Mm-hmm.
This piracy study that we commissioned, the piracy question specifically, was basically, we said, well, you know, we want to do this, and they told us how much, and then, you know, that's how that gets done. So yeah.
It's fascinating. It's really interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah, it is. It's very hard to put together, you know, I mean, this study obviously puts together a pretty clear picture of the pirate landscape, but it's hard to put those pieces together because the internet is such a place of flux. One, you know, it changes from second to second, so any snapshot obviously misses.
So true. Yeah.
Misses a lot of data. So what are authors doing to combat piracy? And this we've had a previous webinar where we talked about, we spoke with some self-published authors who've kind of come up with tactics to, if not stop pirates, be in the loop about what they're doing. It's these remedial measures. There's either the 512 DMCA notice and takedown that we mentioned, which may seem ineffective, but it is still we still highly encourage people to do it, because what it does is if it starts a paper trail, and in any kind of litigation that might pursue for large scale piracy, it really helps to see, well, there are thousands of people who are sending takedown notices. The problem, the ineffectiveness of the 512 takedown notice, one of the biggest factors is that it can, the judicial interpretation of the statute requires that a copyright holder send individual takedown notices for individual URLs. So that means that if you have if a website has your book on 50 URLs, you have to send 50 takedown notices. It also makes it very easy, which is what we call it makes it very easy for people to just re-upload the files, and this is what we refer to it as the whack-a-mole problem, where if you see a link for a pirated PDF on Facebook, you get it taken down, but then someone else will post the same thing and it'll be a different link. The URL will be different, so then you have to start the whole process again. So pirate copies pop right back up. Platform-specific complaints, like as I mentioned, Google has their DMCA dashboard. You can report phishing sites to them, even if there's no pirated copy. Google tracks that data. There's also, I believe, a website called lumen.org, if I'm not mistaken, LUMEN.org, and that's a site set up by Google to track takedown notices that it receives pertaining to certain sites. Just an interesting sort of data source to see, how many people have sent a takedown notice to ebook bike, or if you scroll through it, you see notices from a lot of publishers as well. Devin, do you guys send takedown notices?
Yeah, so our general approach is to basically use the extent of the law and the protocols around that we can on behalf of our publishers to affect takedowns and to reduce the visibility of pirated content. So the DMCA notice to a website operator as well as a hosting service provider is sort of the first step. Mm-hmm. In conjunction with that, we do send all of the pirate links and phishing links that we find through to Google as well as Bing and Yahoo for delisting and de-indexing. Right. Mm-hmm. The Bing and Yahoo share the same search index, and it's not as robust as Google, but they have a voluntary program, so we participate in that. We also, so say if a site uses a content distribution network, Cloudflare is the best known one. So they, in the course of providing their service of sort of network traffic monitoring or management, they will obfuscate the identity of the site operator and the hosting service provider, but they have put up essentially a mechanism similar to the web forms where you can send a DMCA, where you can submit a notice to them and they will forward it to the site and the host. And fortunately, due to a project that the AAP actually worked on with Cloudflare, as a trusted vendor for many AAP publishers, Cloudflare will also respond with the identity of the host to us, so we can expose that to our customers in our portal and that kind of thing. So it's kind of like any entity who might drive a site, might sort of support that traffic, that business, we can kind of touch them and try to get that content down, try to reduce the visibility of it and whatnot. So
that's something that we were involved in the ebook bike affair recently, and Cloudflare, once we sent an email to their abuse at Cloudflare email address, they actually came back with the hosting. It just so happened that the host was abroad and sort of one of those like notorious hosts
Just
that,
so happened, yeah.
yeah. So and this is something that, you know, comes up where and where if you find out that the hosting service is based in the US, or, you know, I mean, even UK or Canada, but definitely in the US, it's advisable to not raise too many red flags, because then the pirates, you know, scurry off to a host in, you know, a jurisdiction where intellectual property enforcement isn't a big priority.
Yeah.
So in some respects, if you learn that the website's hosted on GoDaddy.com, and if it's a notorious website, it might be more useful to just contact law enforcement with that hosting address, as opposed to, you know, because the internet crimes are just so hard to police.
Yeah.
Okay, and it was a quick question, because you deal with this a lot more. What would you say is the response time and the efficacy of especially the delisting request to Google?
Oh, so Google and Bing and Yahoo are very, very responsive. So our process, once we've approved a link and said yes, that's something that's illegal that we want to de-index and send to them, that happens every 24 hours, sometimes more, and then Google tends to respond within about 24 to 48 hours. So it's pretty quick, yeah. And
I'm sorry, go ahead.
Well, so I don't think that we've ever seen any outliers on that, but we've also sort of monitored some that are just extremely, you know, high priority for whatever reason. And yeah, sometimes it can be within, you know, hour or two, something like that. So.
And is that partly because you have a relationship with their enforcement teams, or okay?
I suspect so. So yeah, the program that we're in, again, it's a voluntary thing that Google started doing. Other search engines started sort of following suit. Google calls it the Trusted Copyright Removal Program. And as a high volume trusted vendor, there are certain things that we can and cannot send to them. And if we adhere to that, very, very rapid removal, very high volume removal. So it's a great program, but we just have to be really, you know, stick to the program and not send anything that might be, you know, oh, that should go somewhere else or something like that.
Yeah, that makes sense. I mean, sort of to accelerate the process, so you're kind of doing a lot of the due diligence and vetting, like on an earlier stage before, you know, escalating. That's really interesting. And the delisting means basically just the site won't, it's a little different from deprioritizing, right? So if I search for a book, you know, I might get a few hits for pirate sites.
Yeah. So this is great. So delisting, de-indexing means that URL, that page, Google will no longer index it, meaning that if you Google search for, you know, free ebook download, at least that page won't show up. So that is gone. Now, deprioritizing, we understand, and again, there isn't a lot published about this, but what we've seen is the more infringements you send for a particular site, the more deprioritized that gets from search. So it's kind of, you know, gets down to page 5 to page 10 and whatnot. So
like trust you know, factor kind of goes down.
Exactly. Yeah.
And I think that's really good to know. This is super you know, super interesting, especially to me, because you know, we are we're not tech people here very much, so we have to kind of have things explained to us.
Yeah.
All right. Okay, so this is your, you know, this is what Digimarc's been doing. This is excellent. And it seems like your service is far more effective than, you know, some of the other ones. Muso is
well, yeah, and this is for publishing content. I should make that clear. So some of these other anti-piracy providers focus on books, or excuse me, they focus on books. No, we focus on books. They'll focus on music and TV and multimedia and things like that. We have historically always focused on the publishing industry. So when you take that data and you look at it on Google, this is by far and away the focus for us. So.
But you know, and we were talking about this earlier, so might as well just mention, you know, because we probably have a lot of authors online wondering, where can I get, you know, how can I sign up for the service? Unfortunately, a Digimarc service is an enterprise level service, so only your publisher, you know, can use the service. I think Muso and some of the other ones are often used by individuals.
Yep.
And you know, maybe one day Digimarc will have a individual, you know,
We're always
or a
collecting
group,
information on that. So we're, you know, we want to hear from this community, and yeah, yeah.
or a group plan, you know, as
Yeah.
insurance. Okay, you know, discovering piracy. Just to quickly kind of go over, because I do want to leave time for Q&A, since we have you know, a wonderful resource here. So Google alerts, you know, a lot of authors, probably the most popular way to find out if you have a pirated copy floating around the internet is to set up a Google alert for your book's title and your name. And a lot of times what you'll get is actually phishing websites where the website is created to direct traffic, as I mentioned earlier. We also talked a little bit about the whack-a-mole nature of digital piracy, the fact that you can only send a takedown notice targeted to a particular URL. And removal of that doesn't mean that the someone else cannot post the same book again, or often the content does come back almost immediately. We have, you know, there may be, you might run into problems when dealing with sort of foreign hosts or foreign websites. A lot of times they don't understand that, you know, they don't understand what's being conveyed. I have this on the slide, but I do want to mention that, you know, I saw in the materials that you sent over, Devin, that the US still ranks first in piracy. So
we have the most servers, we have the most, you know, and this is the data that we report is on IP addresses. So end of the day, you know, we have the mega servers here, and we are, yeah. And it does vary, like you start to see. So, you know, of course, if we're looking at like a Sci-Hub or very highly technical information, you might start to see skewed towards like Ukraine, China. You know, there are big servers farms over there and that kind of thing. But yeah, it's, I mean, we are still, we're the problem. So
I was definitely surprised to see that, because I thought it would be you know, it would be a maybe like because we get a lot of complaints about Russian websites, so I thought it was somewhere in Eastern Europe, but no, it's good old USA still. Then, you know, we did touch on the 512c3 safe harbor, which is which prevents a website like Facebook for being liable for what its users post. And the requirements for that are if they have a reporting mechanism and what's called a repeat infringer policy. We can go into details on it in this a certain point, but maybe right now it's not the occasion because it's a little tricky. But basically, they have to do a very bare minimum to make sure that they will respond to complaints of piracy. And we all know that that's not working. And this is just what's required by statute in a DMCA 512 notice. The form that we have on our website is covers all of this information. There's a field for all of this information. So, and you do have to be, if you're gonna get someone else to file a notice for you, they have to have been authorized, just as Devin mentioned. Publishers have authorized Digimarc to send these takedown notices on their behalf. So what the Guild is doing, we are still advocating for reforming the DMCA, modifying it so that it's not as easy for both ISPs to skirt liability, but also for users to just repost pirated books. The idea is that because platforms like Facebook, Google, they have the technical facilities and the technology to be policing their platforms more vigilantly and taking quicker action. So we want the law to, you know, to prod them in the right direction, basically, and so that there are fewer incidents in the first place. We've been involved in Copyright Office modernization. We have I believe our members should have gotten, and perhaps the broader author community will get notification about the small claims bill that is just went up before Senate. And what that hopes to do is create a dispute resolution process within the Copyright Office. Right now, bringing a copyright infringement claim is often cost prohibitive, which leaves a lot of authors and content creators sort of in the lurch because, you know, you have to spend sometimes double or triple amounts just to get your claim in than what you hope to get out of that infringement litigation. So we really think that the small claims proposal would be an excellent way to hold everyone that engages and participates in copyright infringement accountable. We do help authors take down infringing copies, especially if there are websites that are doing it on a very large scale. We are continuing to work on the ebook by and epub.pub issue because of the extraterritoriality problem. It's a little hard because they're now based on foreign servers. We do a lot of educational programming such as this, where we talk to industry experts about piracy and other things. Thank you. And we will now move on to the Q&A session. So we have 16 in the queue. And if you joined the webinar after my announcement at the beginning, there is a Q&A. You should see a Q&A box on your screen, either at the top or the bottom. And you can use that box to send us a question, which we will hopefully answer the remaining 15 minutes that we have here. So let's see. Should start at the beginning in the order in which they were received. Please address the efficacy of Blasty. It charges $38 4 times a year, wondering if it's worth the price. We have recently received a few complaints about Blasty, and people are saying that it's not very effective. A lot of people have canceled their membership with Blasty because of that. We haven't ever used it, so I can't say what it does. But Devin, do you have any?
I mean, we would only know just from the press we've read and, you know, seeing some press of all sorts, but, you know, that people tend to cover bad news more than good. So, yeah. I would say just to kind of, you know, read up about piracy generally, read up about services. You guys have such awesome resources, and then you can sort of decide, is this worth 38? So, yeah.
Absolutely. And there are a lot of, you know, there are a lot of forums where authors discuss their experiences. We have a member community where you can post a question, and someone who's actually had a Blasty subscription or any subscription, you know, can probably answer that. I think if you're going to spend any money, just like in any business, but especially publishing, if you're going to spend any money, you know, just do your research and you'll find the right fit for you. We already answered this question. Which genre of books is most frequently pirated? It's biographies and memoirs. Often pirated. Yes, it seems like they can be.
Yeah, I would say again, it's people will pirate whatever, you know, they would buy. So
what's the difference between piracy and plagiarism? That's an interesting question. So plagiarism, I think of as stealing someone's ideas, which, believe it or not, is not something that the law can help you with. You can copyright infringement does not protect ideas; it protects the expression of ideas. So if you are used copying entire chunks from another person's text, then that is copyright infringement, and piracy is just copyright infringement of entire works on a bigger scale. Okay, sorry. Do the lost sales statistics assume that every pirated copy would have been purchased, copy if the free one hadn't been available.
Yeah, I think that was part of Nielsen's assumptions. Would have to go back into their data munging, which is kind of their proprietary side of the thing, but I believe that was the presumption, yeah.
Yeah, I think that's kind of the presumption that most of the piracy studies are based on, but it is an interesting question to ponder. Thanks, Livia. Can self-published independent publishers use a Digimarc watermark? Devin, I'll let you.
Sure. So the document watermarking, which is the file formats, EPUB, MOBI, PDF, that kind of thing, again, is tied into the digital anti-piracy service, which is an enterprise solution. Digimarc has a lot of other what we call the barcode watermark for other content types. So there's like an image service, for example, for individual consumers. But in terms of the document watermarking for EPUB, MOBI, PDF, then that's part of the enterprise solution. Yeah.
But I think if you are an independent publisher, if you have some like a large enough volume, then
exactly. Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. Sorry, I'm just. My first experience with this was a fiction story I wrote for an IBM Systems publication that I'd written technical articles for. It was an unpaid story. Publication did not have a fiction budget, but my story and the technical articles were put up by this site. It seemed that all the articles were not behind a paywall, were being taken. Okay. It sounds like, if you didn't give them permission to publish that, then it would be, if you didn't sign anything, didn't give them permission to use your story in that way, that could be copyright infringement. What's the best way to prove to, say, Amazon that the book published is my copyright as opposed to the pirates? So copyright exists in your work when it's written down. And the best way to prove that is to register copyright in your name with the Copyright Office. So you have a registration certificate. Do you have a position on PDFs of books that are out of print? For example, a text that is forwarded on interlibrary loan from an institution and also sent to another person who needs to read it. I mean, an out of print doesn't actually mean out of copyright. It is. I see what the concern is there. There's a lot of there are a lot of good books and a lot of good articles that people need and use or have use for that are out of print and not available. But if anyone wants to use them, I'm sure they're accessible through a library. So I don't understand how something being out of print necessarily justifies its unauthorized circulation. Like I said, a book can be out of print, but still in copyright. There's a difference between a content being in public domain, which happens after the life of the author plus 70 years, versus just the book not being available in a new print edition. So I hope that's a little clear. We talked about Blasty. Does more piracy happen via Amazon for ebooks? Is this a suspected high source of pirated books? I think it's whatever channel has the greatest volume will also be kind of the biggest, where piracy would cluster more. Is that correct? It's just it's a volume thing, and I think since the EPUB format, Amazon's the MOBI format, but since Amazon is dominates the ebook market, most ebooks, they might even be exclusively published through Amazon. Yeah. So from that, if a book is exclusively published on Amazon and that it's likely that Amazon was the source.
Yeah.
Do authors see an uptick in sales after takedown notices are sent out? Or is this a crime of opportunity and readers are only interested in content that they can get for free?
We actually have, and so I believe it was even a year before we collaborated with Nielsen. We worked with a researcher out of, I believe she's in Northwestern University, called Imke Reimers, and she did a study using one of our publishers, and we have this on our website too, on digimark.com for anyone. It's a Rosetta Books, who's the publisher, did a white paper with their sales data and our anti-piracy data, and then Imke, who's a researcher, sort of munched it all together. And did find a correlation between, I would say it's not exactly, I don't know that we could say right after a takedown is sent out, the sales go up, but she did find a correlation between, the use of an anti-piracy service and the sales that a publisher would have as a result. So.
Yeah, I mean, I think the principle here is unless we take some action, it'll just keep growing and growing like a mushroom cloud. So any action helps it spread. I mean, it's not going to completely eradicate it, but it does control it. Devin, what service is Devin Weston affiliated with? She is affiliated with Digimark. In addition to Cloudflare, what advice do you have for finding the true host of pirated material? Sometimes it's very deeply hidden. Well, the way to find any host is to do who is search. So you can do who is and type in the URL of the website in Google, and it'll show you who the host is, unless the host is masked by a redirecting service like Cloudflare. And in that case, even that service, most legitimate services of that sort have an abuse email address. So it will, for instance, say abuse@cloudflare.com. So you can send an email to that, and they'll come back to you with the host's address. Okay, are there any actual companies that individual authors can employ to search and deal with possible pirated works? I used to use BL*****, and now it has fallen out of favor. Muso might be one, MUSO. Try that. If legislators were made more aware of the loss of taxable income due to piracy, could more be done to curb piracy? I think as constituents, we should continue to hammer in the importance of controlling piracy to Congress. And we have a campaign right now going on about the small claims proposal. You can read more about it on our website. And if you're on our email list, you will probably get emails about it as we continue to roll it out. Your talk was about reader piracy. What about the entertainment industry that pirates material which has been published? What kind of mechanism is there for immediate control of copyrighted work, i.e. injunction? I think you're maybe talking about like an unauthorized adaptation of a book. That falls under copyright infringement. So anyone who, creates what's called a derivative work, anyone who, for instance, makes a movie off of your book without getting your permission is engaging in copyright infringement. The remedy isn't so much, isn't really injunction unless, it hasn't been made, and courts are very reluctant to grant injunctions as a remedy because it implicates aspects of fundamental rights, free speech, etc. The remedy here is actually recoupment of profits or your lost income. And in cases where the product has actually been made and distributed, that's the main remedy that you get. You might be able to get injunction if you can show that you will be imminently harmed if this thing comes out. Okay. What ebook providers are the safest for an author to enlist in terms of avoiding piracy, enhancing sales, and receiving royalties? I don't think there is one that's better than the other. I think everyone's equally vulnerable. Devin, I don't know if you have any.
Yeah, I completely agree. I don't think, there is no uncrackable, document file format at this point. And therefore, I think any provider of any format is going to be vulnerable. So.
Does it help to not put your book on the Kindle Unlimited? I have heard there's a lot of piracy with those books. I'm not sure if Kindle Unlimited is unique in any way as being a source of piracy. I don't think there's any special. You'd be avoiding any risk by not doing that.
I think it is exactly what we sort of talked about, which is maybe there's a perception of more piracy because again, there's perhaps a higher user base
A
and
higher
more
user base,
potential for,
exactly.
yeah.
This may be slightly off topic. Titles cannot be copyrighted, but is there any action we can take for this? My book went out of print when Little Brown closed an imprint, but a new publisher published my book. However, a book using my book format and a title nearly identical to mine came out a few months later. Her book comes up on Google and even Amazon before mine. What can I do? I mean, yeah, if this, I'm not sure. Yeah, I don't think there's much, there's tons of books with similar titles, and newer ones tend to be more popular. If there is no similarity in the content, I don't think there's like any kind of copyright claim there. Okay, so we have just a couple more. With regard to plagiarism, AG recommend best practices for security or hacking works in progress? No, there's no real protection for that, unfortunately. It's if something's gonna, if your work's gonna get stolen, it's not gonna be, you won't be able to stop it by putting a copyright notice on it. I mean, I think, and it doesn't happen as commonly as people imagine. Thinking about how much people circulate their unfinished drafts, very rarely does anything get stolen. And how do you ask Google to delist my book? One EPUB.pub. EPUB has ignored my DMCA request. Well, EPUB.pub is not a legitimate website. It is a pirate website. You can, if you're an Authors Guild member, you can send us an email and staff@authorsguild.org and we can, guide you through the process. If not, I would go to look up Google's DMCA dashboard and follow the steps there. They actually have a pretty clear tutorial as far as how you can send them a link to delist or look into for infringement. Can someone recopyright and distribute out of copyright works, death of author plus 70 years? Nope. No. Once a work goes in public domain, it cannot be recaptured. Okay, all right. Devin, thank you very much. Do you have any final comments before we log off here?
I would just say, I think we've touched on it a few times, but the more your members can educate themselves, and I think you guys have amazing resources for this, the better off the industry will be, and that's something we really strive to do, is just to educate the industry. So yeah, we're eager to work more with you guys, and very happy for the opportunity to attend.
Absolutely, and yeah, we would love to have more materials describing what you guys do, because you have such a trove of data that's very eye-opening for us and helps us helps us kind of substantiate our deepest fears.
Yeah, always good. We're always good for that. Yeah.
Backed by data.
Yes.
Okay, thank you very much, Devin, and thanks everyone for attending.
Thanks everyone.